This is really about being free to create what you want your life to look like. We each are our own hero. And how do we take the challenges that come our way and see those as the birth process of us becoming heroic? Can you meet that judgment that ultimately will surface with neutrality?
This is the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin.
Welcome back to the Wall Street Coach Podcast. It's been a while since Lucas Peterson and I came together sans a guest, so I'm excited to be here, Lucas, today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Kim?
I'm doing good. We're going to talk about burnout today. I've definitely bumped into this a number of times in my career, but I did bump into this about a month or two ago. And we've also I've been hearing, at least from friends and colleagues, that there is more of an experience of burnout. People aren't really calling it burnout, at least to me, Lucas. Like, nobody's saying, hey, I feel burnt out. But when they start to describe what they're feeling, I am like, that's the hint, shadow, beginning of burnout. How about you?
Yeah, I've seen a similar thing. I think, we were working with an organization like 6 or 8 months ago, and they were worried about burnout. And then I've worked with a couple of people within that organization, and they were describing things that did sound like burnout, but weren't identifying it as that. I think it's part of, it could be a part of a culture, like maybe just that their work, but also I think more of a Western culture too, and especially American, like to push through when maybe we need to step back.
I think so. I think it's so fascinating that everybody is describing the signs of burnout without identifying it that way. And even for myself, I know a couple of months ago, at first, there's a couple of things we're going to talk about today. And when I first got exposed to these descriptions, I was like, oh my God, that's what I was in the experience of. But I was noticing the experience. I wasn't realizing that something was causing that experience. And that's, why we're talking about this today. We're talking about this because I think for traders especially, there's so much pressure internally and externally because of social media, because of Twitter, because of you have to be sort of around a community of traders for you to succeed as a trader, at least in the beginning, I think. And so that external pressure can sometimes exasperate your own internal expectations. So for anybody who is perhaps open to considering this could be me, we're going to give you some input today around how to recognize it, some of the signs, and what to do about it. So
yeah, let's just jump right in. We've got some pretty good resources for this that we found. It's just a couple we'll include in the liner notes. But yeah, if you want to talk about the like maybe the 5 stages of burnout, we'll go through there.
You got it. So subtle dissatisfaction is number 1, and that one I think is just such a great one because it can sound a little bit like a negative Nelly, so to speak, where you just are finding wrong everywhere, and maybe it's more subtle than that in the beginning, but there is this sense of nothing is satisfying you. Even the things that used to satisfy you now, maybe it's like a meh. You're like, yeah, it's okay, but you're kind of distracted by how it's still not as good as it could be. So subtle dissatisfaction is the first one. Subconscious disregard. Now, what does that mean? They're sort of the same, but subtle is, again, it's subconscious, it's underneath, unconscious, but there's this sense of disregard, perhaps for your own self-care, or perhaps your sensitivity to others and their needs and what they're requesting of you or demanding of you.
Yeah, I think that's the one. I feel like this is where like the slippery slope begins, right? And it's something that with our tool that we use, the executive positioning index and the trader positioning index, like it's something that I've been able to identify in people that are like moving into burnout before things get too serious, because it kind of picks up on that.
That's right. The attention column of
yeah.
And that's what's so awesome about this assessment, and why Lucas and I like it so much, is it gives us an indicator when it's starting to be so inhibited that it's putting you in the danger zone. Mm-hmm. And that, when you see that about yourself, then you have a better chance at course correcting before it becomes even more costly. Conscious numbing is number 3. These are the 5 stages of burnout. And we stumbled into them in one of the articles, and we're going to post that article in the liner notes. So conscious numbing is you are having an extra glass of wine at the end of the day. You are having another piece of cake instead of one being enough. You are aware that you're doing the things to not have to feel the hard to be with feelings. Yeah. And everybody has their own kind of numbing. And, I'm speaking to my conscious numbing, right? I'll have an extra glass of wine, or I'll have wine at all. I try to actually not drink during the week and just, do the drinking on the weekend or at a friend's special occasion. But I was like, oh, I'll have a glass of wine tonight because I'm so tired, I'm so tense. And, before I knew it, I was having a glass of wine every night in those couple of weeks because I was so frustrated and overwhelmed and burning out, probably. So conscious numbing, though, I do want to speak about this. Conscious numbing can also be overworking out. Like, really, anything we do can be taken to a place of numbing. Trading. If you're trading and you're sitting at your desk and you're saying to yourself, I shouldn't be at this desk right now, you probably are numbing something that's hard to be with. So anytime you notice yourself, numbing, do you want to say anything about that? I think
I was gonna say the same thing you just said was, one of the ways that I've recognized numbing in my own life is like working out and going for like, I normally work out in the morning, and then by like 4:00 I'm basically done. And then sometimes what I've recognized is when I'm trying to numb, I'll be like, well, I'll just go for like an evening run or something like that. It's like, what? why don't I just want to like be still? And so, yeah.
And look, there's going to be days when you or somebody else, it's okay to have an evening run. We're not making anything wrong, but what we're trying to do is just notice are you aware that you're trying to take the edge off? And if you are, you want to just get curious about what is the edge? What's here? What's here that's pushing you to an edge that perhaps you haven't fully reconciled with? All right, the other one, stage 4, is anxious exhaustion, which I really also was experiencing this not that long ago. This means that even when you're exhausted, when you're laying in bed, you're trying to go to sleep, or you're trying to rest, you can't. You're in anxiety because you've been in anxiety for so long that your nervous system doesn't know how to hiccup out of it. It's just kind of like I'm talking to a very young audience here, but in my day when I was a little girl, we had records and a record would skip and it would continuously keep skipping until you either pressed harder on the needle because the grooves had gotten a scratch in it. And so I think for people who experience anxious exhaustion, you can just tell if you find it really hard to calm down and chill, basically. It's the racing at late at night in your bed when you can't go to sleep.
Yeah. This is, and this is like when it's starting to become like I feel like this is when people like start to recognize, I feel like I'm burning out. And then,
yeah. And maybe they're not even calling that. Maybe they're saying, I just think a lot of people have a tendency to dismiss or diminish these stages when they show up. And, they probably have self-talk that's not very encouraging. So even harder to potentially dig yourself up and out of the hole you're in.
Yeah.
And then stage 5 is full blown trauma. And that is when, basically I've seen a lot of times to people, the physical illnesses will start to show up. You're more susceptible to different sorts of aches and pains. In the middle of mine, my back went out, which has never happened to me in my entire life, but it went out on me in that time period. And I'm very spiritual, as I've talked about before here, and I certainly respect certain aspects of Western medicine, but I definitely am somebody who respects other applications and perspectives. And I have Louise Hay's book, which is sort of a dictionary of all different physical ailments and what could be, not what is, but what could be the emotional or spiritual challenge that is setting it off. And so lower back, what I was experiencing at the time, was not feeling support, not feeling enough support, or feeling overburdened or overwhelmed. And for me, when that happened with my back, it made me realize, and I was forced, I couldn't move, I couldn't walk, I could only sit in this one chair that I had with the heating bed on. I had to even get muscle relaxants, which, I'd never even taken in my life, but I had to because the pain was so bad. And so that was full-blown trauma. That was sort of a slap across the face from the universe. Like, hi, you're going to listen to us now. We've just shut you down, sister.
Yeah. I think that's the unfortunate part, but I feel like that's usually where people start to recognize like something's wrong, right? It's like,
there were signs along the way.
Yeah.
Little dissatisfaction, subconscious disregard, conscious numbing, anxious exhaustion. I had all of them, but I didn't do anything about it. I mean, let me back up a little. It's not that I didn't do anything about it, because I did. I noticed it. I am very self-aware. So I was noticing it, but I didn't feel I could afford to do anything about it. I didn't feel I had time to do anything about it. I thought, okay, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed, but I have to get through this. I have to suck it up, and I'll deal with this in another couple of weeks and, do XYZ for myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't get there. So
what are ways that people can, deal with burnout along the way? What's maybe some notes you've taken from this for yourself?
Exactly. Well, I wanted this. One of the things this article spoke about is that a big part of one of the root problems of burnout is that your work is not in alignment with your soul. That is one of the things they speak to, which I also think is really important, especially for traders and anybody who feels that they're doing what they love. I am doing what I love as a coach, and running an organization, a company. There are so many pieces to that are not, making my soul sing. There's paperwork and, just countless collection of things that I have to do every day. That is not the part that's my most fun. Like, doing these conversations is fun for me. Having sessions with clients, working with you guys, my team, that's all fun. But the minutia underneath. And so traders that are listening to me might be like, well, Kim, I am meant to be a trader. This is what my soul is meant to do. But even in the midst of that, there will be possibly times that there are things you have to do. Perhaps it's another job that you have to have. Perhaps it's responsibilities to your own finances that you have to focus on that perhaps don't thrill you as much as the trading itself. So I love that they spoke about this, because for some people, there is going to be a misalignment between what they are doing for a living and their soul is asking to be more satisfied. Yeah. But there are going to be times where you still have to do the work that isn't fun, that isn't sexy, and you need to find a way to do that and honor the rest. Remember, we had Celeste Headley here, and she talked about, her book was called Do Nothing, which I remember being horrified when I first saw that title. I'm like, what? But she talked about how we don't really realize how we are so focused on productivity that we're disconnected from what our needs for rest are. Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like that's the first piece, is like, okay, are you in alignment with your work that's speaking to your soul, feeding your soul? And if the answer is yes, good for you. You're among a very rare few. And then even in the midst of that, how can you be sure that you are getting the rest you need and some downtime?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's a lot in there as well that, a lot of the successful traders we've worked with, and who truly are like in the top 1% of trading, and very much is their calling. I believe that they would agree with that. But it's funny when at least my clients, what I've talked to, it's not why they got into trading. It wasn't because they felt it was their calling. It was because it would provide them freedom. It would provide them more time. And I think it's important to always check in with that along the way, right? Is like, because that's the reason you go into something is probably because you're like, your soul is calling for that. And it's calling for the reasons around that. And it's like,
absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think also I want to say this, because not everybody is going to be able, there could be traders out there that are listening to this who perhaps are saying to themselves, I'm not really sure it's my calling, but I know how to do it, and I can do it, and I can make a living at it. Yeah. But, singing opera is my calling, or painting is my calling, or race car driving is my calling. We don't always get to make a living from our calling, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are in trading to just make a living or to have your freedom, then consider, how do you create time for yourself where your soul can get its needs met? Maybe you have to be sure that you take that extra time on the weekends to put something into what you love. So maybe it's photography, whatever it is that really does nourish you. And look, especially to beginner traders, it's going to be really hard for you to find any extra time, because on the weekends, a lot of new traders are reviewing. Even sophisticated traders, they spend the weekend reviewing their trades from the whole week and making sure they're congruent and making double sure that if they're changing their plan, they have a track record. Like, I get that takes time, but you do need to be nourished. You do need to pause, even in the midst of that extra work as you start out, to have some opportunity to just have joy, to just have peace, to just have rest. And that, if I circle back to what happened to me when I had that happen with my back, I also probably wasn't getting enough sleep because I was paddling at 4:45 a.m. So I was going to bed, struggling to go to sleep quick enough to get up at 3:30 in the morning. And that was problematic. And it was a kaleidoscope of happenings. That's what I want every listener to think about. It's not just one thing. It's not because you're trading too much. It's probably not enough rest. Also, this crazy pandemic. All of us are under a lot more pressure than we've ever been under.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's come to an end, what, 3 different times now, and then started again.
Sure. Sure.
That's really easy to handle.
Like, talk about like like a mass trauma for the entire world. At least we've all gone through it together. But and keep in mind, if you also have a relationship, maybe you live with somebody else, maybe you live with a bunch of somebody else's, if you have kids or a partner or an in-law or what have you, you also are in the middle of experiencing their experience. You might be Mr. Cool and everything is fine for you, but if you're surrounded by people who are having things up and down, in and out, upset, kids at home having to learn on a device when they never had to learn that way before, all of that is impacting your so-called peace of mind, and it's costing you. So I just think it's important now for people to realize, this concept of burnout, it sort of has a bad taste. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because I think it sounds like you're a wimp or something. Yeah. And I guess I just want to say, you're not a wimp. You're just human who's being overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. That goes back to, I think, the idea of it built into our culture, right? Like the burnout, it's almost like, I don't want to call it a burnout culture, but I think part of the American dream is that like rugged individualism and like working, harder than
your tactical work ethic.
Yeah, exactly. But what happens is like we just truly cannot do that, right? Like we can definitely push beyond, like this is all what it's all about. It's all about balance, right? And it's like figuring out if you're not pushing hard enough or if you're pushing way too hard, and recognizing where you need to be.
And, I'm not ever going to disparage David Goggins. I think he's the most extraordinary human being for his fortitude to have survived his childhood and to have, found a way out of the dilemma he found himself in when he decided to, go full throttle. And I also feel that intensity around just go after it. What is his phrase? He has a catchphrase that he uses all the time.
I'm forgetting it right now, but
you guys can put it in the comments. What is it?
Yeah. So everyone else is listening, knowing exactly what it is right
now. like suck it up. That happy birthday message he gave Joe Rogan, where he's like, "Come on, you pussy, get up!" And like he's yelling at him. This is your birthday, but don't take the day off. Blah blah blah. On one hand, I think it's inspiring, but there are people out there, I will say me, who it's not going to work for me, because I do already play really hard and work really hard. And so just be cautious to not fall into the trap of this, look, we can name a bunch of people like Jocko Willink, David Goggins. Like, these are all amazing men who have created this incredible inspiration for themselves and for people around them. But ultimately, you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody just listening to those, the way it works for those guys, and then compare yourself and say, look at me. I am not, as effort filled as they are, and then feel bad about yourself, because we just don't know. We just don't know what somebody else's journey is about, or what's going to, unfold for them.
Yeah.
All we know is what's unfolding for us, and that's where we have to put our eyes. So I'll kind of come back to center, because we wanted to talk about the stages of burnout, but then we also wanted to talk about what these stages look like too. So this symptoms that could be showing up is this emotional exhaustion. So that means you're going to be feeling tired even when you're not doing that much. And I was definitely experiencing that for myself. I would do very little. There would be days when I felt like I couldn't do anything because I was so tired. But it wasn't like a normal kind of tired. It was a weird, wonky kind of tired. It would be like bursts of energy late at night, and mornings I couldn't get out of bed kind of feeling.
Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder, sometimes I feel like people feel like they're going through bouts of depression or anxiety. And I wonder sometimes if it's, stages of burnout that are being misconstrued with that. And obviously, like there's people who got clinically, diagnosed where that's probably not the case, but
but it could be. I mean, I do think it's a little bit of back and forth. I think sometimes if we're overwhelmed and we haven't paused enough and we haven't perhaps really listened to our soul or honored the taxation that we're all been going through for these past 2 years, I think that easily can slip into depression. And I think depression itself is there's so many different reasons for depression, but sometimes depression is kind of all weaved into trying to do more than the body, mind, and spirit is capable of doing. So, and definitely having trouble sleeping at night can be an indicator that you are in the neighborhood of burnt out. And also the struggle of concentrating or focusing on a specific task. That too is kind of a red flag. Okay, and then let's talk about the other red flags, which is cynicism and depersonalization, where you basically, again, will be looking and seeing kind of the glass is half empty the whole time. You might be blaming people, politicians, the market for your pain and troubles. And one of the phrases that's used that I really liked in this article was compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue means you're just not able to emotionally be available for others. And that's one in particular that is the most concerning, I think, for everybody, because that tells me that a person hasn't experienced their own compassion for themselves. You can't really have compassion for somebody else or empathy for somebody else if you don't have it for yourself. And but compassion fatigue right now, more than ever, I think could be happening for a lot of people, regardless of whether you're in the stages of feeling burnt out, because we have so much exposure to the plights of others, never mind the numbers of COVID victims. But, the Tongan underwater volcano, the things that happen that are not good in the world are put in front of us, at least on Twitter, if not the news. I don't watch television. I don't have a television, but I don't need a television to have that exposure. It comes through social media. And we're just not equipped or built to have that much compassion for people thousands of times a day, which is basically what we're being asked to do. Every time our bodies see that, our eyes see that, and after that all day, then we go to our wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, whatever, or mother, sister, friend, and they want to share something. And we're just like, I'm full up.
I can't. Can't handle it.
I got nothing.
I feel like we could probably do a whole episode, if not series, on compassion fatigue across the world, and especially like the American culture. I think we're just inundated by, like you said, like traumatic events over and over throughout the day. That's what is ever on the news, right? And so, and I think we just become numb to that, and that, I feel like that's a problem. Definitely. And especially because people going through trauma, especially a large amount of people, we can't really connect to that. And this is part of why, any sort of race baiting or xenophobia happens. It's so easy to otherize people when they're at a distance. So when people are on the other side of the world
and they don't look like you, and they don't sound like you, and they perhaps have a different like home or lifestyle, that puts us even further away from having compassion for them. Yeah. We think, oh, it's happening to those people, and then we probably collapse because they don't look like us, sound like us, practice the faith I do, talk like I do, believe the same political party I do, blah, blah, blah. And actually, Adam Smith talks about this in his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And he says there are, it's almost like our ability to empathize is for perhaps ourselves and the immediate family or friends around us. And as those concentric circles grow out from us, the further they get, the less compassion we will have for other people.
Yeah.
However, we are being exposed in such a great number of ways through social media that I think on one hand, it makes the world, those concentric circles closer, but our sense of, what's the word, impotency, that we can't really do anything about it, also triggers that fatigue, the compassion fatigue. Yeah. What can I do? How do I help the people in Tonga? Okay, I can make a donation, but then what? Then I'm not able to do anything else, right?
Yeah. And then, like you said, I think it becomes really evident that you're experiencing compassion fatigue when, your family or a close friend, tells you they're going through something, or you can see they're going through something, and you're just like, that's a bummer, as opposed to
having to solve it. Yeah. And this is definitely, we're very excited. Lucas and I were going to get to have John Gray, who's he wrote the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. If you don't know that book, he has a new version of it. It's an updated version of that book, but he talks at length about how men definitely are, won't feel sort of comfortable in their own skin if they aren't solving a problem. So, I know we have women listeners, but I do think most of our audience is men. That is really important to hear, guys, because if you are biologically wired to feel your ability to solve a challenge that's in front of you is part of being a man, part of the hardwiring, well, then keep conscious of how many times a day you are exposed to something you can't solve. Because if you can't solve it, you are going to feel a drop in your testosterone and an increase in your estrogen. And that is not a good place to be when they're out of balance again. Mm-hmm. So and this is why it's important, I think, to not have a television and not to watch the news, and then do what you can. One of my friends this morning just told me he took himself off all social media. I was like, wow, you're so smart to do that. I'm so jealous. Yeah. So think about it. Yeah. All right. Feeling isolated also can be a warning sign, and feeling isolated can occur even in families, even in a relationship. You can still feel isolated, but if you don't, and you are, still experiencing some of this crazy pandemic in your neighborhood where you can't get to see people, even more indication that probably you're in the neighborhood of being overwhelmed.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember that it's the idea of feeling isolated, right? Not being isolated. Like, you can be among friends, you can be among coworkers, and maybe even if you explain this to other people, they would be like, "How? I don't understand. You're with people all the time," and there's a distinct difference there too. That is
for sure. It's that sense of just because relationships take effort and work, even virtually or by phone, you may not have that extra energy to return the friend's call. Maybe you put it off for the weekend because you're like, I just don't have what it takes to talk to them. And look, I'm definitely an advocate for being picky about your friends. There are friends that are exhausting. There are friends that are what they call, vampires, energy vampires. So I'm not telling you that this is an advocacy of you just being with anybody that's in your circle. I've been very careful about my circles. Early on, I think, because I saw the impact that it had, and because of my temperament, in one of the spiritual teachers that I've had in my life told me that I'm like a human tuning fork. I'm called an adjuster, and as an adjuster, we basically start to just adjust to the energy of the person we're talking to. So that once I understood that about myself, it made me be even more discriminatory in the people that I have around me, and friends, and people that I give my time to, because that is what I tend to do. And there are people who are empathic, which is similar to being an adjuster. It's a little different, but empaths are also going to be people who really feel deeply somebody else's experience, and that would be different. Like they would be. And I am empathic. That's part of where I have to be really careful with looking at the tragedies that happen globally, because I will become sort of crippled by that and physically feel pain. Like when somebody has a book drop on their foot, I feel in my own foot the pain of that book. Like it will trigger a pain response. So all of this to say, like, everybody is unique. Not everybody's built like me. I get that. But you're going to have your own version of this. So you want to be in tune to that and manage that energy. And these red flags we're talking about, if you at least notice them, then you can potentially course correct. It's all about the balance and the course correct. Mm-hmm. All right. And then the last warning sign is a reduced sense of accomplishment, personal efficacy. And that can show up at even losing enjoyment over those parts of work that you normally did enjoy before, or the sense of either your work being meaningless or your efforts being meaningless, and feeling that like anxiety or being down in the dumps is lasting a really long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And to go back to the assessment we do, this picks up, I would say, a lot when people are approaching or in burnout. And what I also always see is it correlating with that self-care, right? And so when I see people have a reduced sense of self, like are not taking care of themselves, basically everything else is starting to drop too, like their meaningfulness of work, their self-confidence, self-esteem. They're just red flags that you probably are noticing, but aren't totally aware how bad they've become.
Yep, for sure. And the other thing that's so fascinating about that assessment is that the work side sits on that self side.
Yeah.
That self side, the description is what kind of a wedding cake is more stable? A wedding cake that has a very small base with a very big, second tier, or is the wedding cake going to be more stable if you have a really big base with a smaller? And of course, that self side is that really important big base. But across the board, it is very infrequent that Lucas or I ever see someone with a stronger self side than their work side. And again, because of this culture we have with this emphasis always on work. Yeah. So this is, we're seeing it across the board with the companies that we do this with. And we want to speak to it because it was something I experienced, and look, I'm doing this work, right? I'm surrounded by the concept of self-development and noticing and trying to be conscious, but it's a slippery slope. It's so easy to fall into it. And for those who are not paying attention, it's going to be even easier. So, I would say once look, I was noticing as it was going, but until the back situation happened, I was like, it was like a slap across the face. Hello, we're trying to get your attention. Now you are going to be forced to address us. That's what it felt like. And I was like, oh shit, I just ignored all the signs for weeks. And I just don't want to see anybody else go through that.
Yeah. And I think it's, the sooner you can recognize these things, the more control you have over it, of lessening the effects, just like anything else, right? I'm thinking about the book, The Compound Effect. I think Brian Lee brought it up when he was on our show. And it's the same idea. Like if you're dealing with this one little thing every single day, it's multiplying every single day. And so then eventually it becomes a weight that you can't carry. But the inverse of that is true as well. Like if you're able to do something little tiny great thing for yourself every single day, it will carry you. So
it's that just, I started, I paddle and I love paddling. There was a little bit of a hiatus on the paddling, and I knew paddling was going to start up 4 days a week. So I didn't want to have my back have an issue. So I started swimming, and I started swimming probably now 3 weeks ago. And this morning, when I swam, I was able to do such a longer stretch than in 3 weeks. Like it just all of a sudden showed up. It wasn't there the other day when I went, but this morning I was like, holy mackerel. I've only come maybe 6-7 times. And like my 8th visit, bam, there's a new level. And that's like 45 minutes to an hour, 3 times a week. Yeah. Like I was shocked this morning. I was like, I can't believe it was like everything just stayed like this. And then it was like, bam, next level. So that little bit really does make a difference. It does compound for sure.
Yeah. So make sure it's self-care and not self-destruction.
That's it for sure. And, the other thing too that I just wanted to speak to is there's a part of me that feels like if you aren't feeling burnt out, it's possible you're very disconnected to what's happening for you. Because I really don't know that anybody in this globe right now going through this pandemic isn't somewhere in the neighborhood of burnout. So even if that's a word that offends you, then come up with a new one. But I just feel we've all been through profound change in 2 years that keeps changing. We get our hopes up. We think we're going to finally be able to get rid of the stupid masks and be able to not have to worry about seeing grandma. Or, a number of weeks ago, I wanted to go someplace and I was like, oh, do I have a cold? I might have a cold. Do I have COVID? I was like, I wonder where I could get a test. And of course I couldn't get a test anywhere. And then I was like, do I not go? Do I go? Like all of that, like this stuff is exhausting to everybody. Yeah. So keep that in mind. People have had financial upheaval. There's been so much happening on the global level that we're all watching and experiencing every day. There's loss of life. We're getting the numbers of millions of people. Again, hard to personalize when it's in the millions. There's just a lot of change on small scale and large scale. And I just think everybody has to be a little bit kinder to themselves to realize this has been a hell of a ride. Yeah. Whether you work with a lot of people or a small group of people or you work for yourself, everybody's going to have journeyed through it differently. And you want to have as much empathy first for yourself as possible so that you can afford to even have empathy for anybody else.
Yeah. Well put.
All right. Should we stop there?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot there. So hopefully people like it.
If you guys have questions, you like this topic, you want to see other topics similar to this, please let us know. Lucas and I read the comments on YouTube when they're there. They're not always there, so please, people, give us some comments. We've gotten some really nice reviews on iTunes. Those make us feel really happy and like we're meeting your needs. But you tell us what your needs are, we can do a better job at meeting them. So let us know, and hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel. We have some really amazing guests in store in the next couple of months. So excited to share them with you. So thank you for watching The Wall Street Coach, and we'll see you on the next episode. Aloha.
This has been the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin. You can find out more about her and her team online at thewallstreetcoach.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.